I want to talk to you about an uncomfortable subject, fear. I think fear gets a bad rep, especially in business. And I want to change that, and I want you to help me. How many of you have experienced fear at work? Raise your hand. Are you willing to admit it? You know, as leaders, as achievers, as people who get things done, we're trained to ignore fear, to pretend that it doesn't exist. Fear is for the weak. Fear is for the timid. Winners don't feel fear. But is that right? Is that good? Does it really help us to ignore our fears and the fears of people that we lead? I don't think so. I think it's only when we embrace our biggest fears that we achieve our most significant growth. Fear is one of the most powerful human emotions that we have. I may or may not be feeling it now. Fear can motivate us to act, or it can paralyze us. Fear can cause us to hunker down and dig in, or it can inspire us to amazing achievements. It can make us rethink outmoded assumptions, or it can cause us to second-guess everything that's made us successful. Fear is tricky. I've spent my career leading change and pioneering new territory, developing markets for multinationals in Asia and around the world, leading startups and building new businesses for Harley Davidson, helping big brands like Amex, FedEx, and the San Diego Zoo innovate and grow. I've seen up close and personal how change gives rise to fear in individuals and organizations. So I want to share with you 5 fears that are common in business and how we can use the tools of design and innovation to overcome those fears and use them to spur positive change for our organizations and for people in the world. The first is fear of losing control. What do you do when your core business is so successful, but it carries within it the seeds of its own demise? When a generation of customers has driven years of profitable growth, but now they are marching every day, one day closer to a time when they can't use your product. And when your success is dependent on a constellation of stakeholders, customers, suppliers, distributors, employees, unions, regulators, community leaders, how do you make big change that satisfies them all? In other words, how do you build for a brighter future without killing your golden goose today? In 1998, Harley Davidson was a $2 billion company. Sales had doubled and profits had tripled in a 5-year period. And yet, fewer than 15% of our buyers were under 35 years old, and fewer than 10% were women. Dealers were selling every bike they could get their hands on. They were not interested in cultivating new customers. And worse, our brand-building efforts had led to a resurgence of interest in motorcycling that was overwhelming the existing state-run rider training programs, clogging the pipeline for new customers. The board identified this double threat and laid down a challenge: remove the bottleneck and make money. You have 60 days to figure it out. Enter fear, stage left. We decided to launch Rider's Edge, a program to teach people to ride at dealerships and introduce them to the Harley community. We used the nationally approved curriculum of the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. We worked with dealers across the country to get good geographic coverage and create a home base for new riders. And we designed the course to honor this important rite of passage for these Harley dreamers with souvenir pictures of them on their favorite motorcycles and a graduation celebration. Rider's Edge increased the supply of rider training, it increased our sales to women and younger adults, and it built a pipeline at dealerships. In fact, Rider's Edge recently trained their 300,000th new rider in the United States. We broadened our demographic without alienating our core by offering an authentic introduction to motorcycling, attracting many of our most avid customers to become instructors, demonstrating the benefits for dealers, working closely with regulators, and involving key stakeholders inside the company and beyond. When you design a system solution that aligns everyone's interests and plays to their strengths, instead of losing control, you learn how to share it. Our next fear is fear of failure, and maybe this seems obvious. Actually, isn't it always fear of failure that prevents us from taking risks? Well, sure, but I think it's equally the fear of being wrong. And the problem with that is none of us is smart enough to get a big idea right the first time. How many times did Thomas Edison fail? Fear of failure is what traps us in safe moves and small ambitions. We need to accept that failure is part of the creative process and plan for it. Fail by design, do it fast, and do it smart. I'll give you an example. Holiday Inn is the world's largest hotel chain based on room count. Looking for growth in a stagnant economy, an opportunity was identified. Vast, unproductive hotel lobbies could be transformed into flexible spaces where guests would gather, socialize, and want food and drink 24 hours a day. The opportunity to increase food and beverage sales was big, but so was the risk of failure. Licensed hotel owner-operators would have to be convinced up front that any change would benefit them. There was no money to invest in big, bold moves. And to compete with outside offerings would mean combining all the functionality of a mini-mart, a coffee house, a fast casual restaurant, a bar, all in one space. So how could we get all this complexity right without investing in a big build-out? Well, we took over a giant warehouse and built a full-scale mock-up of the lobby experience out of foam core, and then simulated every possible interaction that we were trying to enable so we could test it and refine it. Couples would want to have a drink and an appetizer. Families would want to relax and have the kids entertained while mom and dad recharged. Road warriors would want to grab a beer and a bite, maybe check out the game while playing with their PowerPoints. By having the prototype safely out of the public view and cheap to rearrange, we could freely experiment. And the setup allowed us to bring hundreds of stakeholders in, including Holiday Inn executives and owner-operators, to let them experience the concept firsthand. The final design, called the Hub, began an aggressive international rollout this year following a successful pilot. So far, food and beverage sales are up 25% to 35% per room. If you want to build a culture that's not afraid to innovate, you have to replace the fear of failure with the fear of failing to learn. Next is fear of the unknown, and this is about fear of the future and what the future might bring. The key to overcoming this fear is to stop making predictions. Stop talking about what the fear might be like and start creating it now, before somebody else does. Imagine for a moment you are one of the largest banks in the world. The global banking sector is in turmoil. Your headquarters is in Europe, with a front row seat to the European debt crisis. People's perceptions of banking are changing, and not necessarily for the better. And the way people are banking and making financial transactions is also changing. New competitors, ING, Google, are offering new innovations. BBVA is a global bank with 47 million customers. They saw the world changing and they needed to respond. So they started with a question: what is the future of retail branches in retail banking? Now, the problem is that the future of branches kind of depends on the future of banking, and based on recent events, it's kind of unclear where that's headed. So rather than trying to predict the future, we set out to invent it by designing the ideal banking experience for customers in the year 2020. This would have to meet the future needs of existing customers. It would have to meet the needs of those who don't use banks in developed and developing markets, and anticipate the future needs of future young adults who are only teens today. To hypothesize about these future needs, we studied everything. We studied how customers in developing markets manipulate the system of bank promotions to get more giveaways by opening and closing accounts. How small groups of women develop informal saving circles. What bank branch employees really do with their downtime. And how kids playing with Webkinz toys develop notions about savings and consumption in an online virtual economy. The resulting Bank of the Future service model puts the customer at the core. It combines virtual experiences with hands-on relationships and integrates social networks. It allows people to interact with the bank on their own terms, whether that's online at home in your kitchen, from your smartphone in Madrid, from a bodega in Chile, or a branch in Birmingham, Alabama. Defying the fear of the unknown, BBVA is already charting its own course by rolling out the Bank of the Future today. Our next fear is fear of the truth, and maybe you're asking, well, what's wrong with the truth? Well, nothing in theory, but we often have trouble facing it, as when slumping sales are blamed on the weather or impending elections. The truth is, it's only by confronting a stark reality that you can begin to push beyond it. Let's talk about Pampers, a diapers brand, and an uncomfortable truth they needed to face. Tasked with finding new growth, Pampers set its sights on emerging markets, and China, with its vast population and very limited use of disposable diapers, seemed like a good opportunity. It was uncharted territory. Well, it turns out there were reasons why disposable diapers wasn't a big market in China. Outside of major cities, people tended to live in extended families, and with ample adult supervision, children were trained to answer nature's call on demand. Chinese families used a combination of cloth diapers and split pans to support that traditional method. So people in China didn't really care about disposable diapers. They didn't see the need. And this was a stark reality for Pampers. The answer was to dig deeper, reframe the challenge, and find that hidden opportunity. So spending months getting to know Chinese families and unpacking the cultural nuances, it became clear that while working mothers were on the rise, extended support systems were becoming less prevalent. So disposable diapers could offer a way for mom, dad, and baby all to get much needed sleep. And because Chinese consumers valued lightness and breathability over padding, a new design using far fewer material inputs could bring Pampers to China at a radically lower price. By offering the promise of much needed rest, Pampers was positioned as an aid to child development and family wellness. And by radically reducing the price point, it became accessible to the mass market. Having the courage to push beyond that stark reality and create a market where one didn't exist, Pampers became the #1 diaper brand in China and maintains that position to this day. Our last fear is fear of success, and this may seem counterintuitive, but actually a large barrier to innovation inside organizations is the fear of self-cannibalization. The worry that the new product or service will become so successful it erodes the core business. And the antidote to this fear is being prepared. Identify a few leading indicators to track how the new offering impacts the core business, and then run scenarios. What if the new offering really takes off? Could we exit the core business in a way that maximizes our total value? What if the new offering flops? Could we shut it down and minimize our reputational impact? The scenarios themselves can be scary, but by working through them hypothetically, you develop the fortitude to make the right call when the time comes. It's why firefighters run drills. I'll give you an example. Bertucci's, for 30 years, has served its trademark brick oven pizza in family-friendly restaurants up and down the East Coast. In recent years, core customers weren't coming in as often, and Gen Y families weren't showing up. But Bertucci's felt there was a big opportunity with the under 35 crowd. They just weren't connecting with the existing format. Intense study of how Gen Y and millennials eat out and interact with food led to the development of a new concept and a new brand, 2 Ovens. The menu will feature fresh, natural food prepared in simple ways, easy to share, easy to take out. An open kitchen will feature authentic preparation, with food made the same day in one of 2 ovens, each with its own characteristics. Seating will be designed to put waitstaff and diners eye to eye, and staff will be encouraged to share their knowledge of food and their unique personalities. Even waiting for a table will be different, with an analog wait list on public display for easy status checks. Prototyping the concept in multiple forms developed confidence in this idea and clarified how it was different from the base brand. This included a foam core mock-up of the restaurant, videos to generate empathy for the target customers, storyboards illustrating the ideal customer experience, and financial models to simulate the economic outcomes. By prototyping in these multiple languages at once, we could evaluate in real time how changes requested by the executive chef would impact the service experience, then tweak the environment to enable that and see how it would play out in the financials and in the marketing storyline. We even engaged the C-suite in role-playing potential dining scenarios, pretending to be 20-somethings out on the town, deciding to grab a bite, checking the menu on their iPhones, and dropping into the restaurant to share food and drink. So where once Bertucci's was wary of developing a new brand, today they're leaning into their fear. The first new ovens is scheduled to open this December. The list of fears that organizations can encounter is endless. What's important is to face those fears heads on. As leaders, we are trained to make rational decisions, to leave emotion out of the equation. But people are emotional beings. Organizations are made up of people, and fear is one of the strongest emotions we have. I say, as leaders, we teach people to embrace their fears and use them to drive positive change. As every motorcycle rider knows, you can't turn a bike unless you lean. And the faster you're moving, the farther you have to lean. Well, it can be uncomfortable, and it's the same with innovation. If you want to change direction, you've got to lean. So my advice is, whether you're trying to change the world, innovate your company, connect with a new customer, whatever your situation, whenever you encounter that inevitable fear, lean into it. Thank you.